The small town of Laredo, Texas, was a place where dreams often seemed as vast as the surrounding desert and just as unreachable. For Jake Reyes, those dreams began with the whispers of wind through rusted border fences and the stories etched into the weathered hands of his father, Carlos Reyes. Carlos was a man of few words but endless stories. A retired Army sergeant who had served 2 tours in the Middle East, he carried the weight of his experiences like a silent badge of honor. His hands, calloused from years of military service and later construction work, would trace the outlines of old photographs during quiet evenings. Jake would sit beside him, listening intently to tales of brotherhood, sacrifice, and the razor-thin line between survival and destruction. Elena Reyes, Jake's mother, brought a different perspective to their modest household. A high school English teacher with a passion for literature, she filled their home with books that spoke of adventure, resilience, and the human spirit. Where Carlos represented the harsh realities of military life, Elena represented its poetry, narratives of courage that transcended mere survival. Jake was a contradiction from the start. Academically brilliant but restless, he devoured books about military history, maritime exploration, and global cultures. While other kids his age were concerned with social media and high school popularity, Jake was learning Mandarin from online courses and studying geopolitical maps. His grandmother, Abuela Rosa, would watch him with knowing eyes. A woman who had crossed the border from Mexico decades ago, she understood the power of transformation. "Mia," she would say, her voice soft but firm, "some people are born to create paths where others see only walls." At 16, Jake's world changed dramatically. A summer program at a maritime leadership academy introduced him to the complexities of global security and special operations. Here, he met retired Navy SEALs who spoke not of glory, but of responsibility. They taught him that true leadership was about sacrifice, about being willing to put oneself between danger and those who cannot protect themselves. The physical transformation was equally profound. Jake, once a lanky teenager more comfortable with books than physical challenges, began an intense training regimen. Early mornings were spent running miles through the Texas heat, evenings dedicated to strength training and martial arts. His father watched, saying nothing but occasionally nodding a silent acknowledgement of the warrior's path Jake was choosing. Conversations around the dinner table became intense debates. Carlos would challenge Jake's idealistic views with hard-earned wisdom from his own military experiences. "The world isn't a textbook," he would say. "Theories fall apart when bullets start flying." Elena would mediate, her academic background providing a nuanced perspective that balanced her husband's stark realism. Jake's decision to pursue becoming a Navy SEAL wasn't a sudden revelation, but a gradual understanding. It was a calling that emerged from years of preparation, of understanding that some people are meant to stand on the front lines of human protection. The application process was grueling. Countless physical tests, psychological evaluations, and background checks stripped away any romantic notions of military service. Jake understood this wasn't about Hollywood heroism, but about a profound commitment to something larger than oneself. His high school guidance counselor was skeptical. "You're too smart to throw yourself into such danger," she had said, looking at his exceptional academic record. But Jake knew intelligence wasn't about avoiding risk. It was about understanding it, managing it, and being prepared to face it for a greater purpose. The day he was accepted into SEAL training, his family's reaction was telling. Carlos's eyes glistened with a mixture of pride and concern. Elena hugged him tightly, whispering prayers of protection. Abuela Rosa simply pressed a small medallion of Saint Michael, the patron saint of soldiers, into his palm. "Protection comes in many forms," she told him. "Your mind will be your greatest weapon." As Jake prepared to leave for initial training, the town of Laredo seemed to pause. In a community where military service was both respected and feared, his journey represented something more than personal ambition. It was a continuation of a legacy of service, of standing up when others might step back. The night before his departure, sitting with his family, Jake reflected on the path that had brought him here. It wasn't just about physical strength or tactical skills. It was about understanding the profound responsibility of protection, of being willing to place oneself between chaos and those who cannot defend themselves. His father's words from years ago echoed in his mind. A warrior is not born in battle, but in the quiet moments of preparation, in the choices made long before the first shot is fired. As dawn broke over Laredo, Jake Reyes was no longer just a son, a student, or a local kid with big dreams. He was about to become something more. A guardian, a protector, a Navy SEAL in the making. The journey to become a warrior had begun. The walls of the team's temporary barracks told stories that no official military report could ever capture. Photographs, patches, and handwritten notes created a mosaic of shared experiences, a visual testament to the bonds forged in the crucible of special operations. Jake Reyes had long since learned that a SEAL team was more than a military unit. It was a living, breathing organism with its own heartbeat, its own language, its own unspoken understanding that transcended words. Mike Rodriguez was the first teammate Jake truly connected with during advanced training. A second-generation Mexican-American from East Los Angeles, Mike brought a street-smart intensity that complemented Jake's analytical approach. His expertise in explosives was matched only by his ability to crack jokes in the most tension-filled moments. Their first real connection came during a brutal, week-long training exercise in the mountains of Washington State. Temperatures had dropped to well below freezing, and the team was navigating through nearly impossible terrain with full combat gear. Mike had noticed Jake struggling with a particularly challenging section of the route, not from physical weakness, but from a momentary crisis of confidence. "Hey, Reyes," Mike had whispered during a brief rest, "your mind's playing tricks. These mountains don't care about your doubts. They only respond to your actions." It was a simple statement, but it became a turning point. Jake realized that survival wasn't about perfection. It was about persistent forward movement, about supporting the team even when individual strength wavered. Sarah Chun was unlike any operator Jake had ever met. A communications specialist. With a PhD in computer engineering from MIT, she could decrypt enemy communications faster than most could read a simple message. Her parents, first-generation Chinese Americans, had instilled in her a complex understanding of global dynamics that went far beyond typical military intelligence. During one critical training mission, Sarah saved the entire team by identifying a communication pattern that suggested an imminent ambush. Her ability to read between the lines of intercepted transmissions became legendary within their unit. Jake watched in awe as she transformed raw data into actionable intelligence with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. Marcus Williams, their sniper, was a study in controlled intensity. A former college basketball player from Louisiana, he had traded the basketball court for a precision rifle. His nickname, Ghost, came from his ability to remain undetected. In the most challenging environments, Marcus could remain motionless for hours, his breath so controlled that he seemed to become part of the landscape itself. Their first real test came during a classified mission in a volatile region of the Middle East. Intelligence suggested a high-value target was moving through a complex network of urban and mountain terrain. The mission was anything but straightforward. Jake remembered the briefing like it was yesterday. The room was silent, heavy with the weight of potential consequences. Each team member brought something unique to the table. Mike's explosives expertise, Sarah's communication skills, Marcus's precision, and Jake's strategic planning created a synergy It was more than the sum of its parts. The mission went sideways almost immediately. Their initial insertion point was compromised, forcing them to adapt in real time. It was during these moments that their training truly showed. Communication was minimal, often reduced to hand signals and pre-arranged codes. Each movement was calculated, each decision made with the entire team in mind. When Mike was wounded during an unexpected firefight, it was Marcus who provided cover, creating a window for Jake and Sarah to extract him. The Brotherhood wasn't just about combat effectiveness, it was about survival, about ensuring no one was left behind. Their debriefing was unlike any Jake had experienced. No blame was assigned, no recriminations made. Instead, they analyzed every moment, every decision, with a clinical precision that was both brutal and supportive. This was how elite teams survived, by turning every challenge into a learning opportunity. Between missions, the team was a study in contrasts. They would spend hours playing strategy games, discussing global politics, or simply sharing stories from their vastly different backgrounds. Mike would talk about growing up in East LA. Sarah would share insights from her academic research. Marcus would discuss his love for jazz music, and Jake would bring historical context to their conversations. They weren't just soldiers. They were thinkers, strategists, individuals with rich inner lives that extended far beyond their military roles. Each mission, each shared experience, added another layer to their connection, a bond that went beyond friendship, beyond brotherhood, into something almost familial. As another deployment approached, Jake looked around at his team. They weren't perfect. They had their disagreements, their individual quirks and challenges. But when it mattered, they were a single unit breathing, thinking, acting as one. The mountains they would soon traverse, the challenges they would face, would test them in ways they could not yet imagine. But Jake knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came, they would face it together. The Brotherhood was real. The bond was unbreakable. The operations center was a study in controlled chaos. Banks of monitors displayed a kaleidoscope of satellite imagery, communication feeds, and real-time intelligence streams. This was the nerve center where global conflicts were analyzed, dissected, and understood before a single boot touched foreign ground. Lieutenant Jake Reyes stood before a massive digital map, his fingers tracing the topographical lines of a region that had become all too familiar. The target area was a complex network of mountain ranges and small villages nestled in a region that had been a geopolitical powder keg for decades. Intelligence suggested the presence of a high-value target, a key insurgent leader responsible for coordinating attacks that had claimed dozens of civilian lives. Sarah Chun's voice cut through the background noise, her fingers dancing across multiple communication interfaces. "We've got something," she said, her tone a perfect blend of professional detachment and underlying tension. Intercepted communications show increased chatter in the target area over the past 72 hours. Mike Rodriguez leaned in, studying the satellite imagery. His explosives expertise meant he saw the terrain differently, not just as a landscape, but as a complex system of potential threats and tactical opportunities. "See these rock formations?" He pointed. "They create natural choke points. If I were planning an ambush, this is exactly where I'd set up." The mission briefing was unlike any they had prepared for previously. Their target wasn't just another insurgent leader. Intelligence suggested this individual was responsible for a network that had been systematically destabilizing critical infrastructure across the region. Schools, water treatment facilities, medical clinics, nothing was off limits to this network of extremists. Colonel Harrison, their senior commanding officer, was a veteran of multiple conflict zones. His weathered face told stories of countless missions, of lives saved and lost. "This isn't just about taking out a target," he explained, his voice low and intense. "This is about disrupting a network that's been bleeding this region dry of hope. The briefing room fell silent. Each team member understood the weight of the mission. This wasn't about glory or statistics. This was about protecting people who had no other means of protection. Jake's mind raced through the mission parameters. Years of training, months of preparation, had led to this moment. The team had spent weeks preparing, running countless simulations, studying every possible scenario. They knew the terrain better than most locals. Satellite imagery, drone reconnaissance, human intelligence, every piece of information had been meticulously analyzed. Marcus Williams was reviewing the potential sniper positions, his mind creating a three-dimensional map of potential engagement zones. Wind patterns are critical, he muttered, more to himself than to the team. These mountain ranges create unpredictable wind currents that can throw off even the most precise shot. The equipment preparation was a ritual in itself. Each piece of gear was checked, double-checked, and then checked again. Communication devices, medical supplies, tactical equipment, everything had to be perfect. In their world, a single overlooked detail could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Sarah had developed a custom communication encryption protocol specifically for this mission. Standard military encryption is good, she explained to Jake during a late-night preparation session. But good isn't enough when we're dealing with a target this sophisticated. I've developed a quantum encryption method that should be virtually unbreakable. Mike was equally meticulous with their explosive and breaching equipment. Each charge, each piece of specialized gear was prepared with a surgeon's precision. These aren't just tools, he would say. These are lifelines. The psychological preparation was just as crucial as the physical. The team underwent intensive briefings about the cultural context of their mission. This wasn't just about military objectives. It was about understanding the human landscape they would be operating in. Jake remembered the words of a senior SEAL who had mentored him years ago. A successful mission is won before the first shot is fired. It's about understanding, about seeing the entire chessboard. As the final preparation day arrived, a strange calm descended over the team. Years of training, months of specific mission preparation had led to this moment. They were no longer just individuals. They were a single, complex organism designed for a specific purpose. The night before deployment was always the most intense. Some team members would read, others would work out, maintaining both physical and mental readiness. Jake found himself reviewing historical accounts of similar missions, seeking patterns, understanding potential variables. Mike would later joke that Jake was overthinking again, but they all knew that this level of preparation was what kept them alive. Their families knew nothing specific about the mission. Coded messages, carefully worded communications, these were the lifelines that connected them to the world they were about to leave behind. As the final hours ticked down, the team gathered for their pre-mission ritual. No words were needed. A look, a subtle nod, a momentary touch on the shoulder, these were their languages of communication, of understanding, of brotherhood. The mission was about to begin, and nothing could have prepared them for what was coming. The mountain silence was a lie. One moment, the world was a canvas of muted grays and shadowy terrain. The next, it erupted in a symphony of violence that no training could fully prepare them for. The first volley of bullets came with surgical precision, not random sprays of ammunition, but calculated strikes designed to maximize confusion and minimize escape routes. Their tactical vehicle, a specially modified transport that had survived countless missions, became a death trap in seconds. Jake's training kicked in before his conscious mind could process the attack. Movement was survival. Thought was action. Contact. Multiple directions. Marcus's voice was calm, almost clinical, cutting through the initial chaos of explosive impacts and shattering metal. The vehicle's left side disintegrated under a concentrated RPG strike. Mike Rodriguez, who had been monitoring their communication systems, was thrown sideways, a spray of blood marking his trajectory. Sarah Chun's hands were already moving, her body instinctively dropping into the most protected position, fingers, working to salvage any remaining communication equipment. Jake's mind was a supercomputer of tactical assessment. The ambush was too perfect, too coordinated. This wasn't a random insurgent attack. This was a professionally executed military grade operation designed to eliminate their entire team. Tangos at 3 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and high ground. Marcus called out, his voice a lifeline of information amid the cacophony of combat. Their attackers had chosen the terrain with devastating intelligence. The mountain's natural formations created kill zones that funneled their movement, limited their options. Rocks that moments ago seemed like natural landscape features were now potential cover or potential graves. Mike was wounded, a bullet grazing his shoulder. Blood mixed with dust and debris, creating a macabre landscape of survival. "I'm hit, but operational," he reported, his voice tight with pain and adrenaline. Sarah was a blur of motion. Despite the chaos, she was working to establish any form of communication. Their primary systems were destroyed in the initial blast, but she had backup protocols, encrypted channels that could potentially call for extraction or support. "Comms are down," she reported, working on alternative frequencies. Jake knew they had minutes, not hours, to change their situation. Every tactical training scenario, every simulated combat exercise, had prepared him for this moment. But nothing truly prepares you for the raw, terrifying reality of being hunted. The insurgents were using advanced tactics. Their attack patterns suggested military training, possibly from multiple international sources. They weren't just fighters. They were a coordinated, intelligent fighting force with one objective: total elimination. Marcus began returning fire, his shots precise and calculated. Each bullet was a strategic decision, not just an act of violence. "Suppressing fire at the eastern ridge," he called out, his voice a metronome of controlled aggression. Jake assessed their situation with brutal efficiency. Their vehicle was compromised. Their communication systems were largely destroyed. They were outnumbered, potentially outgunned, in terrain that favored their attackers. "Mike, status of explosives?" Jake called out, his mind already formulating potential escape strategies. Mike, despite his wound, took inventory quickly. 2 breaching charges, 1 smoke, 3 fragmentation grenades. Limited, but usable. Sarah had managed to jury-rig a communication device, working within human speed and precision. Her background in advanced communications was proving to be their potential lifeline. The mountain seemed to breathe with violence. Bullets impacted around them, sending rocks and dirt spraying across their makeshift defensive position. The sound was beyond noise. It was a physical presence, a living entity of destruction. Jake realized their survival depended on breaking the predictability of their position. "We need to move," he called out. "Mike, prepare smoke cover. Marcus, provide overwatch. Sarah, continue Kun's work." Their movement was a choreographed dance of survival. Each step calculated, each moment a potential life or death decision. The smoke grenades created a temporary visual barrier, allowing them momentary reprieve from the concentrated fire. But Jake knew smoke was temporary. Their attackers were too professional to be completely fooled. In that moment, suspended between survival and potential destruction, Jake understood something profound. This wasn't just about completing a mission. This was about returning home, about the families waiting, about the team, their true family. The mountain continued its violent symphony, and they were determined to survive its deadly music. Communication was their lifeline, and right now, that lifeline was fraying. Sarah Chun's hands moved with a precision that bordered on supernatural. Years of training, countless hours of practice, and an intuitive understanding of communication. Technologies transformed her into something more than just a communication specialist. She was their bridge to survival. The backup communication system was a marvel of engineering, a custom-built device that Sarah had personally designed and tested through multiple mission scenarios. Most military communication equipment was standardized, predictable. Hers was different. A quantum-encrypted, frequency-hopping marvel that could potentially penetrate the most challenging communication dead zones. "We need to break through," she muttered, more to herself than to the team. Blood from a small cut above her eyebrow mixed with the dust and sweat, creating a war paint that marked her determination. Jake watched her work, understanding the critical nature of their situation. In special operations, silence was more than just the absence of sound. Silence could be a killer void that separated life from death. Mike Rodriguez, despite his wounded shoulder, provided technical support. His expertise in communication systems complemented Sarah's advanced techniques. "Try the tertiary frequency band," he suggested, his voice tight with pain but professional focus unbroken. Marcus Williams maintained defensive positioning, his sniper's eye constantly scanning the surrounding terrain. Every few seconds, he would call out potential threat locations, ensuring the team remained aware of their vulnerable position. The communication attempt was a delicate dance. Each transmission risked revealing their location to the insurgents, who had so effectively ambushed them. Too much information could guide enemy fire. Too little could mean being left behind, forgotten in the vast, unforgiving mountain landscape. Sarah's device began a complex encryption sequence. It wasn't just about sending a message. It was about sending a message that could be received, understood, and acted upon without compromising their position. "Hammer 7. This is Trident 1. Jake began, his voice measured and controlled. "We are under heavy fire. Multiple tangos, estimated strength of 20 to 30 fighters. Our position is compromised. Request immediate extraction or fire support." The radio crackled. Silence. More bullets impacted around them, sending rocks and dirt spraying across their makeshift defensive position. Each moment of silence felt like an eternity. Sarah's hands never stopped moving. She was simultaneously attempting multiple communication strategies: frequency modulation, quantum encryption, burst transmissions, each method a potential lifeline. "We need to give them something to work with," Mike said, understanding the complex game of information exchange. Precise coordinates, terrain description, potential extraction points. Jake knew the risks. Every piece of information could be a double-edged sword. Too much detail could guide enemy fire. Too little could mean being overlooked by potential rescue teams. The mountain seemed to breathe with a malevolent intelligence. Wind currents carried the sounds of distant movement, potential reinforcements, the subtle indicators of an ongoing threat. Marcus continued his vigilant watch. "Movement at the northeastern ridge," he reported. "Possible additional insurgent positioning." Sarah's device suddenly came alive. A series of encrypted pulses, barely perceptible to the human ear. "Partial transmission received," she reported. "But I can't confirm full message integrity." The team's survival now depended on a razor-thin margin of technological precision and human intuition. Jake understood the psychological warfare at play. The insurgents knew standard military communication protocols. They would be listening, waiting, attempting to intercept or jam their signals. "We need to be smarter," he said, looking at Sarah. "Can we piggyback our transmission on an existing frequency? Something they won't expect?" Sarah's eyes lit up. This was more than a technical challenge. This was a complex puzzle that required creativity, technical expertise, and an understanding of communication technologies that went beyond standard military training. Her fingers flew across the device, implementing a strategy they had theoretically discussed, but never practically tested. Using commercial satellite communication frequencies, embedding their military communication within seemingly innocuous data streams. Minutes felt like hours. The mountain continued its violent symphony of distant gunfire, wind, and the ever-present threat of imminent danger. Mike administered a quick medical check, ensuring their physical conditions remained stable. A wounded team member could quickly become a liability in such extreme conditions. Marcus continued his defensive positioning, his sniper's instincts, providing a constant layer of protection. And Sarah continued her technological ballet, dancing between frequencies, encryption protocols, and the slim hope of establishing contact. The desperate call continued. Their survival hung in the balance. Precision was an art form, and on this mountain, that art would determine who lived and who died. The shot came from a place that shouldn't exist. A ghost's whisper of ballistic perfection that cut through the chaos like a surgeon's scalpel. One moment, the insurgent leader was coordinating the attack with calculated brutality. The next, a single round found its way through his skull with such surgical precision that it seemed to defy the laws of physics. Then, another, and another. Marcus Williams was the first to recognize the signature. This wasn't random. This wasn't their team. This was something else entirely. Those shots, he muttered, his trained eyes scanning the distant ridgelines. That's not standard military precision. That's something else. Jake felt the shift in the battlefield's energy. The coordinated assault that moments ago seemed unstoppable was now fragmenting. Confusion replaced certainty. The hunters were becoming the hunted. The mysterious sniper was executing a tactical masterpiece. Each shot was more than a kill. It was a strategic disruption. Communication lines between insurgent units were being systematically destroyed, their leadership neutralized with cold, calculated efficiency. Sarah Chun's communication equipment picked up the subtle changes in enemy communication patterns. Their coordination is breaking down, she reported, her voice a mix of professional detachment and barely contained excitement. Someone is systematically dismantling their command structure. Mike Rodriguez, still nursing his wound, began to piece together the tactical implications. This isn't random support, he said. This is a deliberate intervention. Someone knew exactly where we were, exactly what was happening. The mountain, moments ago a death trap, was transforming. The insurgent force that had seemed invincible was now scrambling, their carefully planned ambush dissolving into chaos. Jake's military training kicked in. Years of experience had taught him that unexpected salvation often came with its own set of complications. Stay alert, he commanded. This isn't over. The mysterious shooter continued their work. It was more than a rescue. It was a surgical strike that dismantled the entire enemy operation with mathematical precision. From a ridge nearly 2 kilometers away, a lone figure moved with a fluidity that defied conventional understanding. This was no ordinary military operator. This was something beyond standard special operations training. Marcus recognized the ballistic signature. Delta Force, he whispered, a mix of respect and professional admiration in his voice. But not just any Delta operator. This is someone special. The shots continued. Each one a statement. Each one a lifeline. The insurgent force, which had moments ago seemed unstoppable, was now fragmenting. Leadership targets were being systematically eliminated. Communication networks were being disrupted. The perfect ambush was unraveling with terrifying speed. Sarah's communication equipment began picking up fragmented enemy transmissions. Panic. Confusion. The kind of breakdown that only happens when a military unit loses its strategic cohesion. Their command structure is completely compromised, she reported. The professional detachment in her voice couldn't completely hide the underlying excitement. Mike began preparing their defensive position for potential extraction. Years of training had taught them that opportunity could emerge from chaos in the blink of an eye. Jake watched the mountain transform. The terrain that had been their potential grave was now becoming their salvation. The mysterious sniper was executing what could only be described as a tactical ballet. Each movement, each shot was calculated with a precision that went beyond standard military engagement. "Who the hell is doing this?" Mike muttered, his eyes scanning the distant ridgelines. The answer would come later. For now, survival was the only mission. Marcus continued to provide tactical assessment. Multiple enemy combatants neutralized. Estimated remaining threat down to less than a third of original force. The mountain seemed to hold its breath. The violence that had moments ago threatened to consume them was now receding like a violent tide. Sarah's communication equipment crackled to life. Partial transmissions. Potential extraction coordinates. The first real hope they'd had since the ambush began. Jake understood the bigger picture. This wasn't just about their survival. This was about something larger. A strategic intervention that went beyond a simple rescue mission. The mysterious shooter continued their work. A ghost in the machine. A guardian that shouldn't exist. As the dust began to settle, one thing became clear. They hadn't just survived. They had been saved by a force that operated in the shadows, beyond the conventional rules of engagement. The hidden ridge had become their salvation, and nothing would be the same again. The first light of dawn painted the mountain in hues of steel and ash. Survival looked nothing like the Hollywood movies. It was raw, messy, broken. Medical personnel moved with practiced efficiency, their movements a choreographed dance of professional urgency. Mike Rodriguez sat on the edge of a field medical station, his wounded shoulder being meticulously treated. Each movement was a testament to pain, to survival. Sarah Chun stood nearby, her communication equipment spread out like a technological constellation. She was already beginning the process of analyzing their mission data, understanding how they had survived what should have been an impossible scenario. Jake Reyes watched the mountain. The terrain that had been their potential grave was now just another landscape. But he knew better. Mountains remembered. Mountains told stories. The extraction had been anything but standard. Military helicopters had descended like mechanical angels, their rotors creating cyclones of dust and debris. But it was the ground. Team that caught Jake's attention. They moved differently, carried themselves with a precision that spoke of something beyond standard military protocol. "We need a full debrief," a voice cut through the morning air. Colonel Harrison approached, his weathered face a map of experience and unspoken stories. This wasn't just a routine mission recovery. This was something else entirely. Marcus Williams was the first to notice the unusual nature of their extraction team. Delta Force operators moved among them, but these weren't standard personnel. Their equipment, their approach, everything was slightly different. U-4, Colonel Harrison began, his voice carrying the weight of decades of military experience. Experienced something extraordinary. The medical tent became a secure briefing room. Classified documents were spread out, satellite imagery overlaid with tactical analysis. Jake could see the fragments of their mission, each piece a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. Mike's medical examination continued. The bullet wound was serious, but not critical. "How did we survive?" he asked, more to himself than anyone else. Sarah's technical analysis began to paint a picture. The communication disruption, the precise sniper intervention, the perfectly timed extraction. Nothing was coincidental. "The shots that saved us," Sarah began, her fingers tracing digital maps. "They came from a position that shouldn't have existed. Our satellite imagery shows no standard military positioning. Colonel Harrison's silence spoke volumes. This was more than a standard mission debrief. This was a carefully managed revelation. Jake watched the colonel. Years of military experience had taught him to read between the lines. Something significant was being left unsaid. The target, Harrison finally spoke, was more than just another insurgent leader. He was part of a network that extended far beyond what our initial intelligence suggested. Classified photographs began to emerge. Complex communication networks, financial trails, a web of connections that seemed to span continents. Marcus studied the images with a sniper's precision. This goes deeper than our initial mission parameters. He observed. The medical tent had transformed. It was now a secure briefing room, a place where the lines between mission and mystery blurred. Sarah's communication equipment began picking up encrypted transmissions, fragments of conversations, hints of something larger. We were never meant to just eliminate a target, Jake realized. The pieces were starting to come together. This was about something more significant. A strategic intervention that went beyond a simple military operation. Mike, despite his injury, began connecting the tactical dots. The precision of the support we received, he said, that wasn't standard military protocol. That was something else. Colonel Harrison's expression was unreadable. Years of military service had taught him to reveal nothing, to give away nothing. Some missions, he finally said, are about more than what appears on the surface. The mysterious sniper, the perfectly timed intervention, the extraction that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Each element was a piece of a larger puzzle. Sarah's technical analysis continued. Communication patterns, tactical interventions. Everything pointed to a level of coordination that went beyond standard military operations. We were a part of something, Jake said, the realization dawning slowly that we were never meant to fully understand. The mountain outside remained silent, a witness to a story that would never be fully told. Medical personnel continued their work. Helicopter rotors continued to pulse in the distance. And the team that had survived the impossible began to understand that survival was just the beginning of a much larger story. Marcus looked at the mountain. "We're not done," he said quietly. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. The aftermath was never just about survival. It was about understanding. About piecing together a narrative that existed in the shadows between known and unknown. And they had only just begun to scratch the surface. 10 years had passed since that night on the mountain. Jake Reyes sat in his office at the Naval Special Warfare Development Group headquarters, a space that seemed both familiar and foreign. Photographs lined the walls, not of personal achievements, but of teams, of moments, of connections that transcended individual glory. The world had changed. Warfare had evolved, but some things remained constant. His team, Mike Rodriguez, Sarah Chan, and Marcus Williams, had taken different paths, but their connection remained unbreakable. They were more than colleagues, more than friends. They were survivors. They were family. Mike had transitioned into specialized counterterrorism consulting. His expertise in explosive detection and tactical analysis made him one of the most sought-after security experts in the private sector. But those who knew him understood that it was never about the money. It was about prevention, about saving lives. Sarah Chan had become a bridge between military intelligence and technological innovation. Her work in quantum communication and cybersecurity had revolutionized how military and intelligence agencies approached information protection. Government contracts, academic research, cutting-edge technology. She moved between these worlds with a grace that few could comprehend. Marcus Williams had returned to his roots in Louisiana, establishing a training program for veterans. But this wasn't a typical rehabilitation center. It was a crucible, a place where veterans could rediscover purpose, rebuild their lives, and understand that their value extended far beyond their military service. Jake had chosen a different path within the military: strategic development, understanding how individual missions connected to broader global dynamics. The mysterious mission that had nearly claimed their lives remained partially classified. Fragments of intelligence suggested they had disrupted a complex international network far more significant than a simple insurgent operation. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Colonel Harrison, now a senior advisory position in military intelligence, entered. The years had added more lines to his face, but the eyes remained sharp, observant, understanding. "We never fully told the complete story," Harrison said, sitting down. Jake knew this conversation had been coming for years. The classified file between them was more than a document. It was a narrative of global complexity. The insurgent network they had disrupted was connected to multiple international actors, intelligence agencies, private military contractors, financial institutions. Some missions, Harrison said, echoing words from a decade ago, are about more than what appears on the surface. Sarah's research had uncovered layers of communication networks that suggested a level of coordination beyond traditional understanding of global conflict. Mike's explosive expertise had helped track financial trails that connected seemingly unrelated global events. Marcus had been collecting stories, not just from veterans, but from local communities in conflict zones. Each story was a thread in a larger tapestry of global understanding. A mountain mission had been more than a single tactical operation. It had been a moment that changed everything. Jake remembered the mysterious sniper, the perfectly timed intervention, the extraction that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Each element was a piece of a larger puzzle that they were still trying to understand. "We were never just soldiers," Jake said quietly. "We were part of something larger." Colonel Harrison nodded. The weight of decades of military service reflected in his understanding. Their team had become something more than a military unit. They were connectors, bridges between different worlds of understanding. Mike's work in counterterrorism prevention had already saved countless lives. Sarah's technological innovations were reshaping how intelligence was gathered and protected. Marcus's veteran support program had become a model for holistic veteran recovery. And Jake? He was the strategic connector, understanding how individual moments created global narratives. The photograph on his desk told a story, the four of them, taken shortly after their mountain mission, bruised, wounded, but unbroken. "We survived," Marcus had said during their last reunion. But survival is just the beginning. Their legacy wasn't about individual achievements. It was about connection, about understanding that true strength came from recognizing our shared humanity. The classified file remained open. Fragments of a story that would never be fully told. Hints of a mission that had changed everything. Outside, a new generation of special operations personnel trained, prepared, ready to face challenges that hadn't yet emerged. Jake understood now what truly mattered. It wasn't about the missions. It was about the connections, the moments between moments, the human stories that existed beyond official narratives. As the sun set over the Naval Special Warfare Headquarters, Jake Reyes reflected on a journey that had begun on a distant mountain. A journey that was never about a single mission, but about understanding our shared human experience, one moment at a time.